and welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger, both in the employment group at Offit Kurman. So this week, we are going to be talking about remote work, but a little bit a different aspect than we've talked about in the past, which is discrimination and anti-harassment policies. So now that people are remote, things are a little bit different. A lot of people think about discrimination and the types of behaviors that you talk about with discrimination and harassment as what happens within the four walls of the office. But really, both because now everyone's remote and just given where we are with technology and social media and all those things, that's really not the case anymore. It really is just a much more expansive risk and a lot more to manage at this point. Because things outside the office and conduct of employees outside the office can, in fact, actually violate those policies or create a hostile work environment for employees in ways that are kind of new and not really under the traditional model of concerns over the discriminatory joke someone puts on their cubicle wall, right? So now we've got Facebook walls, we've got different social media, and we've got people outside the office. What are some things that people should be considering, Russell?
Yeah, so the federal anti-discrimination law, Title VII, was passed in 1967. Obviously not with social media in mind back then. So no, while the law has always made clear that it's beyond, the four walls of the office do not limit its application because things that happen outside of work can impact what happens inside the workplace. We're in a whole new frontier with that. And even though we've had social media for a while now, we're now elevated in terms of what our the prevalence of that given remote work, particularly because of COVID. So here we are with kind of a lot more people working remotely, a lot more people spending a lot more time on social media, and so employers have to be cognizant of the fact that an employee's conduct on social media outside of work could be text messaging with colleagues as well, or other types of messaging apps, or I'm realize I'm kind of getting beyond the point where I know everything that's out there anymore. I'm still on MySpace, but given all that, it's a lot. It's a burden for employers to kind of keep track of because it's not that you need to go out and necessarily police what everyone's putting on their social media, but I think employers should have social media policies. And then when employees make complaints about what another employee is posting on social media, employers need to address it and take it seriously because you can imagine if a supervisor puts an offensive joke or makes offensive comments online, and then comes into the workplace and that supervisor's employees have seen it, how's it going to impact that workplace relationship? It is going to have an impact in the workplace. So, it's just important for employers to keep in mind that their ability to regulate their obligations under Title VII to address are going to include those social media comments and online activity.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen a misperception around that with clients that, they are seeing what their employees are doing online as their personal business and they don't want to get involved in that. And like you mentioned, not suggesting that you're policing them all the time and watching everything that they're doing online and, probably not very efficient to do it that way. But it's definitely something that, there's got to be policies in place about how that gets handled if someone does come to you and, as an employer and say, I'm really offended by what's going on online, how you're going to handle that. And you don't want to, as an employer, you don't want to say, well, that's their personal time. That's their personal business. I'm not going to worry about that because that's a mistake. Right. So, and it's also an important thing, we've talked about training on here. And so training around harassment and discrimination is very important, even in this virtual world, especially in this virtual world, I would say. And when you're talking about these issues in training, it's a good to tell the employees that, make a note of these issues and say, look, we're not here to police necessarily everything that you're doing, but you need to realize that what you do outside of work, can impact these things, and that you need to be mindful of these issues. And we also see it when it comes to clients and people posting and being friends with their clients online. And so, you definitely want to make sure that you're giving thought to policies around expectations for those types of things.
Right, and if it isn't clear to people already, when employers do trainings, and everyone should be doing annual sexual harassment training, discrimination training. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor for all employers. But when you do those trainings, it's important for the person doing the training to point out, now look, you put stuff online, it's out there. Coworkers are going to see it, most likely. Customers might see it. You're putting that stuff out there, and it's gonna stay out there. And for better or worse, it's going to be there. It's part of the record now, and that can cause problems for you down the road. So I think it's an important reminder of for employees to hear that their social media conduct does reflect on their work activity.
Yeah, and it's true also just in these virtual conversations that everyone's having in the workplace too. Instead of having a verbal conversation with someone walking next door, we're through these platforms, we're in our homes, but there still needs to be a reminder to employees that just because you're working remotely, so even beyond the social media stuff that we've talked about, even when you're working remotely, you might be making the call from your kitchen, but you're still at work. You're still having a conversation with your colleagues. You're still, there's still a standard of conduct, that you need to uphold as an employee in those circumstances. So I think that that's also something that's important to loop in as well, as far as, there's a lot of different technology that we use in the workplace at this point through chats. And, there's a lot of, I know we use Teams, and when I chat with you, Russell, I can do, little funny images and things and jokes around, what we're talking about. And that makes the workplace fun. At least I think it does. But that's also, that's in my workplace. That's where, the joking and that kind of stuff's happening. But just a reminder on, that what what the expectations are in employees in those formats as well.
Yeah, I mean, the simple way to think about it from an employer perspective is wherever the employees are working is the workplace. So cyberspace, at home, in the office, at a client site, I mean, that's all workplace for purposes of an employer having exposure for violations of Title VII. So there are also places where an employer should be a little bit of proactive with respect to training and responding to complaints.
Yeah, well, I think this is a topic that will be ever evolving for sure. Be curious to see what platforms come next in these conversations, and how else we'll have to adapt these laws. Since 1967, and a lot has changed, and I'm sure a lot will change as we continue to have these conversations with clients. So, but we'll see you next time. Thanks, Russell.
Yep, thanks, Sarah. See you next time.